Welcome into the Why You're Wrong Fantasy Football Podcast. Today is episode 7, Dancing the Bad Juju Away. Now, as you can see, it's just me today. I'm missing both my co-hosts. Both of them have started their fantasy basketball season, and tonight is opening day. They're both very into fantasy basketball now. Brian especially because he's been eliminated from playoffs in both of the leagues he cares about. On the other hand, Romney was told he could not come over. His girlfriend said, due to COVID, someone here might have had it because they came in on an airplane recently. But I don't think he does. But she has been pretty victorious in preventing him from showing up today. It's a week 16. Championship week is here. Only 2 managers are left in all of the leagues right now. The big question is, are you still in? So, we got to talk about dancing this bad night away. Juju, 3 for 15, 15 yards, had negative fantasy points in some leagues. Now, there were probably thousands of you out there that played Juju Smith-Schuster being up by maybe decimals of a point. You just wanted the reassurance to make sure because of a stat correction you'd still win. And unfortunately, he has now lost you the game. I have a personal vendetta against Juju. I could have been in another championship this week, but last week I was up by 2 points. I needed Pittsburgh's defense to do nothing. I was playing against Juju. Him and Deontay Johnson had nothing all game. On the last drive that mattered to the Steelers, Juju comes away with a touchdown and I lose my game by 5 points. Now, that's not the worst touchdown that happened against me. I'm still pretty bitter about the fact that in that same week, Mike Gesicki caught a touchdown through triple coverage. And if he didn't not do that, I'd be in a championship right now because I would have beat the semifinals opponent that I would have been playing against instead of the man I lost to. But moving on. Sunday was very Pollardizing. Zeke is ruled out late into the week that led Tony Pollard getting the start. He had 69 rushing yards, 63 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns, ending with about 28 fantasy points depending on what format you're in. He most likely won you the week, for he was the RB1 on the week, and he probably helped you crush your opponent in a fantasy matchup. And again, this coming week, if Zeke doesn't play, Pollard's a fantastic flex play, easily a low RB2, high RB1. Now, the reports are that Zeke was held out to a calf injury last week and could easily be back for next week. But depending on what the Cowboys are doing with their current season, Zeke might not even play, so you just want to be watching the news. And then the Jets went and jetsed. They beat the Los Angeles Rams. So you were having a pretty bad day if you're relying on the Rams defense to walk away with 10 to 20 points that you're hoping over the past few weeks. But the Jets ended up playing themselves out of their first draft pick. Now the Jaguars own it, and now the Jets are at risk of losing out on Trevor Lawrence, and the Jaguars have no chance of winning the next 2 games. And there are reports that there's the potential that the Patriots purposely throw their last game against the Jets so that the Jets definitely can't get Trevor Lawrence, which is just a rough day for Jets fans. And then Gio Bernard stealed the win away from the Steelers and opposing managers. A lot of people out there are very hesitant to play him. A lot of people just probably didn't want to play him but were forced into it. He ended the night with 83 rushing yards, 14 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, ending with between 20 to 24 fantasy points on your format, and most likely helped crush the soul of your opponent that you were playing. Probably started off the week laughing at the fact he had to play Giovanni, and is now upset the fact you got to play Giovanni. So, since it's just me, I've got one Why You're Wrong player to talk about, and he's the wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings. I'm talking about Adam Thielen, not Justin Jefferson. So on the year, Adam Thielen has 94 targets, 62 receptions, 771 yards, and 13 touchdowns, and averages 14.6 points per game. Wide receiver 10 on the year, drafted as wide receiver 12, and he's had the kind of year where he either helps you just crush your opponent, getting 20 plus points a week, or he's had weeks where he just disappears for 4 or 5 points. Now, some managers out there have made the poor decision of trading him away at the deadline. For example, our commissioner traded away Adam Thielen for AJ Green and David Johnson, and then proceeded to drop David Johnson because he was placed on IR for a concussion. In the end, he basically traded away the wide receiver 10 for the wide receiver 80 at that point in time, which was just a rough thing to do. And that's why our commissioner is not in playoffs. But to get to the actual point, Adam Thielen is going against the Vikings, and Adam Thielen are going against the New Orleans Saints. And the Vikings are in a position where they just need to win their last 2 games to have a chance of making it into the final seeding for playoffs. In this situation, I believe the Vikings are going to be down, so it really doesn't matter that they're going to have to feed the ball to Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, and Dalvin Cook to have a chance of winning this game. I don't think it's the kind of game where he ends with 5 or 8 points. I could see Thielen ending with 70 yards, a touchdown, maybe 2. It could be one of those games where Thielen comes up big for the 2 weeks he's disappointed you so far in playoffs. But now we got to get to that burn list, that week 15 burn list of guys that you probably started that you've been rolling with all season long and have now probably cost you a game or almost cost you the game depending on how they played. We're going to be talking about starting off with Austin Eckler, who was basically injured all year, came back. Every fantasy manager that drafted him and held on to him was super pumped. He had easy matches for playoffs, ended with 9.9 points against the Raiders. Clyde Edwards-Helaire only managed 8.8 and is now out for the final week. Devontae Adams fell flat on his face, 7.7 points. That's not what you wanted. Mike Davis against the soft defense only got 7.1. DK Metcalf, though playing a very strong defense, you were hoping for at least a touchdown and some yards, only finished with about 6.8. Raheem Mostert came back at the end of the year. You're hoping that the 49ers would run all over Dallas. Unfortunately, he only ended with 6.8 points, got hurt. Cooper Kupp, playing the Jets, hoping for a big game, 6.4. Tyler Lockett. The problem with Tyler Lockett, he either scores 40 points a week or nothing whatsoever. It's been very frustrating for Tyler Lockett owners. At the beginning of the year, I was really upset I didn't draft him. Now looking back, I basically almost avoided the bullet of having to play Tyler Lockett every week and then being upset with the fact that DK Metcalf has just fully taken over the wide receiver 1 work. Kenyon Drake, 5 points. It seemed like he was turning the end season around. Totally fell flat. Todd Gurley, don't play him. 2.4 points. The Falcons don't know what they're doing with their running backs. Keenan Allen, you played him hoping for a big game versus the Raiders. 2.1 points. Got hurt and taken out. Then the Steelers defense. I'd honestly been worried about this matchup because I had to play against the Steelers defense in week 15. Playing a third string quarterback for the abysmal Bengals, the Steelers should have eaten them alive. And Ryan Finley comes out, dumps on the Steelers, and the Steelers defense finishes with 2 points. That's a bad burn if you're relying on the Steelers defense all year to get you those 10 to 15 points like they normally were. Now, to get to the waiver wire wisdom, now, if you're in the championship, you most likely don't need any help, but you could have just hit an injury and just been totally screwed. You thought you had the bench players, and the bench players are gone. I'm talking about someone in my position. Some of the wide receivers out there right now, this isn't a 12-man team, so not a lot of guys out there, but these are guys you could take shots on if you really needed to. Darnell Mooney on the Bears, owned in about 10% of leagues. Scored touchdowns over the last 2 weeks. Gets to play a very soft matchup in the Jaguars. But the thing is, can you trust Mitch Trubisky at quarterback? It's very hard. I see this game being a David Montgomery game where they're just going to get up early and run the ball out. Now, Mooney could easily just sneak in for a touchdown, but he's not the main option in Chicago, and Trubisky loves to throw to Allen Robinson and no one else. Another name you could be looking at, Jalen Reagor on the Eagles, owned in 24% of leagues. He seems to have a connection with the other Jalen Hurts, playing a soft matchup in the Cowboys. He is questionable with an injury though, but if he is a play, he's probably the best Eagles wide receiver to play, but you don't have a lot of faith in any of those guys at this point in the season. Mecole Hardman for the Chiefs scored a very amazing touchdown last week. He's the wide receiver 3. They're playing the Falcons. Both of these teams are very pass happy, so it could be a high scoring game. But Mecole Hardman will get 3 looks a game, might catch one of them, could catch a 70-yard bomb for a touchdown, or just catch 1 catch for 10 yards and end his game on that. So he's a very flashy shot in the dark. So you got to take your risks with all of these guys. Hopefully you have someone better to pivot to at this point. Now running backs. Even harder if you didn't have the chance to pick up Darrell Henderson, Le'Veon Bell, or Tony Pollard, who's now owned in 47% of leagues. Like we've been saying all year, Tony Pollard's a league-winning handcuff. Fortunately, my opponent this week picked him up. But those are the three guys who look to have boosts this week, with Cam Akers being out for the Rams, Clyde Edwards-Helaire being out for the Chiefs, and potentially Zeke being out for the Cowboys again. Those three guys could put up a lot of points. Another running back group you could be looking at is the 49ers. Jeff Wilson seemed to be the guy last week, but he's also now dealing with an injury, so you could take the shot on a Jerick McKinnon or Tevin Coleman. You might want to lean McKinnon just because he has a lot more upside, a lot more talent. When Coleman's been on the field this week, he hasn't looked great. He's looked sluggish. He'd probably have the better chance with McKinnon. Could be totally Coleman's game. You just never know with the 49ers running backs. Then, if you're super desperate, Darrell Williams on the Chiefs is sitting out there. No Clyde. Bell will be the main guy, but he could relieve Bell on a few plays. Just the backup running back, but the Chiefs have showed this year that they don't even need their running back. And then other guys that could also be out there. Apologies, my light has died. But some other dudes that could be out there you could be potentially looking at are guys like Ito Smith, but that's not going to feel great. You could be looking at, honestly, no one else, to be honest. You could play Jamal Williams, hoping he gets in some reps, but he left the game last week with an injury, so there's really no chance of finding a waiver wire running back unless someone has dumped their players or dumped their flex guys or dumped their bench because they've given up on the season. Tight ends. Tight ends are always hard. They've been hard all season. One guy that's sitting on our waivers is Austin Hooper. He went 5 for 41 and 1. He gets to play the Jets this week. Baker Mayfield has been on fire the last few weeks. Loves filling to his tight ends. Austin Hooper can easily disappoint you. He hasn't been trustworthy all season, but he could be that guy that comes in and scores you a touchdown and 30 yards to give you that 10 to 12 point boost at your tight end spot. Jordan Reed, last week got 5 targets, 2 receptions and a touchdown. Now Kittle may return, but if he doesn't, Jordan Reed will still be a tight end 2. He's not a tight end 1 because they don't have a reliable quarterback, but he may be the red zone target if they get down there. A third tight end you could be looking at, Jimmy Graham on the Bears, owned in 27% of leagues. The Jaguars just bleed points, and I think they're taking it at this point, so they're trying to get blown out. Jimmy Graham's a red zone threat. It's hard to trust the Bears quarterbacks, as I was saying about Darnell Mooney, but Jimmy Graham's a red zone target and could score a touchdown or could totally bust. You're really just going at touchdown potential upside guys at this point, so you're taking a shot in the dark if you're in the championship league still looking for a tight end. So to talk about my championship game versus John Rumney this week, so I was the 1 seed. John came in as the 3rd seed, destroyed Chris Coppola last week, just absolutely obliterated him, doubled his points, destroyed his life, and for the millionth year in a row, Chris Coppola will not be in a fantasy championship game. But looking at our matchup, at this point, John's team is definitely built for the end of the season. When I made these stats or put them in a chart, I was projected about 120. John's was projected around 126. Every time I go to look at this, my point projection is slowly going down. John's is slowly rising. And the key players on his team is Derrick Henry at Green Bay, David Montgomery at Jacksonville, Travis Kelce at Atlanta, and Kyler Murray is always going to put up points. Those 4 can easily combine for 100 points. And looking at my matchups, my big guys all year have been Dalvin Cook, Aaron Jones, Justin Jefferson, and Tannehill had a big game last week, but looking at their matchups, Tannehill at Green Bay, the only way he does well if he does what he did last week and steals a few Derrick Henry touchdowns. DK Metcalf is going to get shadowed by Jalen Ramsey. They project him at 14.6 points. He's either going to get 20 or he's going to get 5, depending on if he can beat Ramsey in one-on-one coverage. Same thing for Justin Jefferson, playing a hard defense with New Orleans. But with him and Dalvin Cook, I think they're going to be fighting for their playoff lives. So I think they're going to go down swinging. They could have good upside games. I'm hoping Aaron Jones can match David Montgomery or Derrick Henry. He should have a good game versus a soft Tennessee defense. Logan Thomas can continue this multi-reception performance where he gets 10 catches and 80 yards, ends with about 15 points. That's what I'd really need. And if Rodrigo Blankenship could kick me like 3 or 4 field goals. But the biggest thing I'm relying on is Chicago's defense versus Jacksonville. Most likely what I would really need is Chicago to get a few defensive turnovers, takeaways, a bunch of sacks, maybe a touchdown or two to really be the game changer on my team's side. A short episode as always for week 16. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share. It only helps grow the channel. It's waiver wire day, so if you're desperate, see who someone picks up. Remember, you can play defense trying to be picking up guys that your opponent might need just so they don't get them. Don't celebrate your victory too early. The games are stretched over about 4 days. Just because your opponent does poorly on day 1 or you do really well on day 1 does not guarantee your victory. And always remind your players in your league to adjust their lineups unless you're playing them. If John wants to keep his players in the lineup and then their starters come in and he doesn't notice, I'd be all about that. But as always, cheers to everyone watching. I hope you the best of luck in your fantasy matchups.